friends, it's Michael Parker, and welcome back to Michael Parker Media. This weekend, the unthinkable happened, and there was an assassination attempt on former President Trump. And there are many questions that are arising about this. How could it have happened? Why did it happen? Was there a single shooter? Were there multiple shooters? It seems like in the days after this, the questions have only continued to mount. Our guest today is Michael Letts. He is the founder, president, and CEO of Invest USA. That is a national grassroots nonprofit organization that's helping communities provide bulletproof vests for police forces through educational, public relations, sponsorship, and fundraising programs. As of June 2023, they have donated more than 13,520 concealable active shooter vests to police officers throughout the United States. Michael has received a Congressional Gold Medal Award for community service and a Order of Palmetto, which is South Carolina's highest civilian honor for extraordinary lifetime achievement and service to the state and nation. He has a big background in law enforcement. And right before we started this, he also let me know that he once was an asset of the Secret Service during the Reagan administration. Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Always a privilege, Michael. Thank you so much. We appreciate your show, appreciate what you stand for, and I want you to know by telling the truth to the American people, you're making a difference, and we'll be celebrating won't be too much longer.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate this. So let's get down to some really uncomfortable aspects of what happened this weekend. Now, you know a lot about these types of things, and you said that you were an asset of the Secret Service at one point. So tell us a little bit about that before we get into what happened on Saturday.
Fantastic, Mike. What I want to do is we'll set the stage so that your listeners understand the facts of what's supposed to occur. Then we'll go into the incident itself. But let your listeners know we need to be fair. I'm going to make sure they understand everything on both sides, equal, equality there and fairness. So here's what you have going on. You have a presidential protection package. That is only for incumbent presidents, people that are currently in office, for the first lady and for the vice president. Those are the three that get the presidential protection package. The next layer under that is what we call just the presidential package for former presidents. Then underneath that, you will have another package for dignitaries, VIPs, ambassadors, etc. So understand that in this instance, because you remember either you're the incumbent president or if you are the nominee, you get the presidential package. But you remember as of Saturday, he was not the nominee till Monday. So he will still have the same security, just the second tier, the presidential package. Now, what is the difference between the two? Presidential package has full assets. You get as many agents as you need, full access to full technology. You've seen it before, helicopters, drones, et cetera, et cetera. The next layer down, you get a much scaled back complement of officers and agents, and you have limited usage of technology. And then, of course, just on the ambassadorship, et cetera, you just have a few agents assigned, and that's it. So he's operating on the second tier, not on the third tier, not on the presidential package. So I want people to understand when they say, well, where are the drones? How come there weren't thousands of agents there? He did not have the presidential package. He only had the former president. That having been said, now we go into what happened and how it gets set up. 2 days prior, you sent an advance team, okay? And I'm going to point out on each one as we go through this where the red flag should be. Your listeners and your viewers will have the information and they can make some determinations on their own. So 2 days before, we go in and you assess the situation, you assess the area, you find the critical elements where the easiest target setups can be had. In this particular location, the easiest or the most important targeted area was we call them barns. You can call them, buildings. We call them barns. Was the barn that actually the assailant was on. What happens when you identify that as the most threatening environment or the most threatening location? Typically, you place one of your assets on that rooftop, okay? That was discussed in this situation, but it was determined that no, we didn't think it was necessary. Now, that's a red flag, but I call that kind of a medium red flag. That's subjective, typically that would not have been done. They would have put agents there, but you could always argue that for whatever reason, they didn't think it was necessary. So they did put the agents there. Now you go to the event itself. Everyone is in place. First of all, they're opening it up and allow the attendees to come in, all the spectators come into what we call the main area. Once that area has been full and they secure it, then they have the gates, or called outside of that, the outer perimeter. And that's where, it's not nearly as regulated, but it's so far away, you're not inside the area, in the perimeter area, you don't have a good sight line, so it's much more difficult for you to do any actions against the president. Now, here's what happens. Now we're talking about timetables. We knew this 27 minutes before. I want you to keep that in mind. 27 minutes before the president was shot. So now that it's secure, you have the assailant, Mr. Cross, who gets out of his vehicle and begins to approach this building. Now, remember, he's not the only one that's on the outer side gates. There are a lot of people that wanted to get inside as well. So now you have spectators, the citizens, begin to holler out, because you also have law enforcement in that area, not nearly as much, but you have law enforcement in that area. Begin to holler out, there's a man with a gun, okay? And they point. Now, here's what I want your listeners to understand. I'm not just speculating. I think this may have happened. All of this is on video and audio.
Mm-hmm.
So everything I'm telling you can be factually documented, and it's been recorded. So when they're hollering out, there's a man with a gun, you have two law enforcement personnel, a local officer and a Secret Service deputy, that turn, look in that direction, look at the assailant, but nothing happens. Okay, so that's flag number 2. Why didn't they move immediately on a person with a gun? Here's the third aspect that you need to understand. Anytime there is a gun or a suspicion of a gun, you are to immediately call in on communications, gun. That's an automatic signal. The officers closest and around the president or the protectee immediately jump in, provide a human shield and cover, and escort him away from the situation, not just into a covered area. Let's wait, kind of like a storm. Let's see what happens. It blows over, they will resume. You get him out of there altogether. I mean, the event's over. That's it. He's gone. We move him out. Nobody called in gun. So now we've got the third red flag. You continue to move down the scenario. He gets to the building. He begins to climb up via a pole to get onto the roof of what we call the barn. He gets on there. He begins to crawl to get into position. Now, this is taking him 10 minutes to crawl around. Now the spectators inside the arena begin to see him, and they holler out, man with a gun, man with a gun. Same scenario. Now they begin to scatter, Michael, because they know this is not going to end well, okay? So they begin to scatter. You have on video and on camera, again, a Secret Service agent and a local law enforcement who look, identify, and take no action. So that's the fourth red flag. Now, what you happen after that is now the president gets up and comes to the podium. Now, next to the president on the barn closest to him, we have 2 CAs. What is a CA? A CA is a counter sniper, okay? Now, typically they are Secret Service agents, but you remember we don't have the full service package. And then to compound the issue, Michael, you had Jill Biden and Kamala Harris in the area campaigning. So you now had to disperse even more agents to make it even thinner. How do you handle it when it's thinner? You rely more on local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and even military assistance for snipers if needed. So the 2 CAs that are on the barn are not Secret Service agents. They are local law enforcement. But they're not just typical local law enforcement. They're members of the SWAT team. They're good. They know how to, they're snipers. They know what they're doing. It's obvious the proof is in the pudding, Michael. He took him out on the first shot once we got to it, okay? So you have him on the roof. He begins to see activity. He gets down. All this is on video. He pinpoints him with a scope. You can see him pinpointing with a scope. He then says, I have an assailant with a gun. Permission to engage. Silence. Okay? 43 seconds later, he gets the clearance to take the shot. The assailant has already gotten off 3 rounds, one of which hit the president. That is a huge red flag. I've had people tell me, well, why didn't he just take the shot, when he saw there's a gun there? I mean, everybody knows you're supposed to protect the president. Understand that the directive had been given, okay, says you're not all Secret Service agents. Nobody gets to just take a shot at anything when they feel like it. You have to get approval for engagement first. So the call went in to the senior agent who was there, supervisor agent, for permission to engage, and it didn't come back for 43 seconds. Now, is that typical? That's so far, Michael, outside of protocol. I don't think there's enough room for us to describe how odd a protocol that is. But that's what happens. So the assailant gets off 3 shots. He gets off more, but first shot hits the president. 2 more hit 2 other people. That first shot that hit the president went through the earlobe but continued to travel, killed Corey, the fire chief, the firefighter that was sitting, on the bleachers back behind. He had gotten down to protect his wife and his daughter, and he took the bullet for him instead. Of course, he lost his life. But there were 2 others that were sitting in that area as well who were also injured critically via him getting off those additional shots. The CA on the barn, that is our guy, the CA, on that after that 3rd shot takes his kill shot, end of it. That's it. That shuts down that particular assailant. Now remember, you don't know, Michael, whether he's acting alone, whether there are other people in the crowd, etc. So here's a couple other things I want your listeners to be aware of. As you review the tape, the president is hit. Now, typically, we're that close that you knock the president down. Okay, you jump all over. You're bringing him down like a football player, just tackling the quarterback that just got the ball. In this case, you will notice the president fell down or came down himself, and it took about 3 seconds before the agents behind him to get up to engage to provide the outer cover. One of the things you'll notice as they're providing the outer cover, there are 3 female agents. Right. Now, why is that significant? Because the director for the Secret Service, Miss Kim, what we call her big claim to fame is she believes in the DEI program. She is determined to have at least 30% female in the Secret Service division. Now, nothing against females, Michael. Love them to death, okay? But you will notice that the female in the front, next to the podium, when she moves in to provide the cover detail, she's about 1.5 feet shorter than the president.
Right.
So there is a big gap from where the bullets have just come from the shoulder on up. Big no-no. If you look behind, you'll see the female agent that's behind doesn't even move to cover the rear sector. She's acting like she's froze, like a deer in headlights. You could hear her on the audio. What are we doing, guys? What's going on? What do we do? What do we do? That's not a good sign either, Mike, okay? So one of the male agents steps in, provides that cover. They pull him down, keep him down till they think it's been secured. I've had people say, well, he was down too long. In my opinion, he was, okay? But that's, again, subjective. You remember, just like we talked about initially, should there have been a shooter on that particular roof? I think there should have been, but again, that's subjective. They get him up. They move him to the Suburban, transport him. You'll notice while there's all the fluster going on trying to get him in, that of course he stops. He pops his head up. Now, you can't do anything when a protectee wants to do that. He wants to do that. This is right, okay? And he shakes his fist and says, fight, fight, fight. But what you do notice, Mike, is that as they're struggling to get him in, get his head down, get him into the Suburban, you have the 3 female agents that are in the front. One of them can't even figure out how to get her sidearm back into the area. So what does it tell you? It tells you that on his particular security detail, he's got the B team, okay? He doesn't have the A team. He's got the B team. You say, well, is that out of protocol? Let's talk about where the problems, red flags on that one lie. You have had intelligence that has now been coming over the last 30 days that an assassination is probable or possible for Donald Trump. So his team, knowing that they're not the presidential protection package, but knowing they're inadequate in terms of the assets that they have, make 3 separate requests to beef up personnel and to provide additional technology, drones, helicopter, whatever's necessary to provide the proper protection. That was denied 3 times. Where do those requests go? When you're talking about a presidential detail, those requests go immediately to the director. A copy then goes to the Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, and a copy goes to the White House, to the president. That's the order of approval. Am I suggesting that Joe Biden said, nope, let's see, hopefully they'll take him out? Joe doesn't know whether he's in the restroom or not. That's why we had problems with him soiling himself when he's in front of public. Okay, I'm not going to pin that there and say that he had the capacity to devise something. But we also know this one. We know that Joe Biden is not calling the shots in the White House. He's not calling the shots this administration. His mental capacity is too far gone for that. So whoever is calling the shots, of course, we have a vague idea who's doing that. Obviously, wants to make sure that they maintain power and are willing to do so at any cost, including taking the lives of those who are most likely to stop their plan to retain, keep power in this presidential race.
Okay, Michael, you have given us a lot to unpack there, and you've done a very good job of covering most of the things. I would have typically probably already asked 4 or 5 questions, so I'm going to start asking them now.
Right ahead.
Let's go back to this building that the shooter was on top of, because now it appears that there were actually 3 local snipers inside that building. Have you heard this?
That we'll put it this way: that is the building they were using for staging. So yes, there were Secret Service and there were law enforcement officers in that building. That is correct.
Okay, because what I am trying to figure out, there are so many lapses, failure points that have occurred here. It really, really is very difficult for a rational person to get their head around how this could have happened. We got a 20-year-old kid.
Right.
I don't know how difficult that shot was. I've heard some people say that it could be trained. A normal person could take that shot, could be trained easily. But still, the kid to get there, and now they're trying to say that he had gone to Home Depot, I believe the day before, and purchased this ladder. So now he's taking a ladder. Now he's taking a gun. He's by himself, apparently, and he gets on top of this building, which law enforcement was already in. It just begs to question, how is it possible that all of this could have happened? And from the get-go, we saw footage. People saw this young man on the roof. And they are saying that they reached out to local law enforcement and said, look, we've got a guy on the roof. I really don't understand how all of this could have happened. And now my concern, and I'll admit this is speculation, but my concern is A, nothing happens. B, if something does happen, it will be blamed on local law enforcement.
Well, let's analyze. You raised some great questions there, Michael. So let's take them one at a time. First of all, when you're talking about the local CA that was there, he knew that picture, because he knew he was on video. He knew that they would eventually, the media would figure out who that was and plaster all over the place. What's the matter with this guy? He delayed 43 seconds. So he immediately, within the hour, got in touch with Secret Service, with law enforcement, with those investigating, and put it out on social media to make sure he was covered. Said, look, before you go judging me, here's the deal. I had him in sight, could have eliminated the threat long before he even got off the first shot, requested permission to engage, and was never given so until the time that I took the shot. So I didn't mess up. I did what I was supposed to. Somebody asked this question. This is important on your show, Michael. Why would you not just take the shot? The president's in danger. Understand that things are different from in my day, okay?
Mm-hmm.
In my day, you took the shot. If you made a mistake, you were covered. Your intent was good, okay? Nowadays, with the mass media portraying law enforcement as baboons, they're dangerous, etc. And then they're always guilty. So if something even looks like it's going wrong, it's automatically your fault. What does that do to the set of mind of law enforcement? What does that do to their mindset? Well, if they said no engagement until it's cleared, who am I to do anything different? Even though I realize that's probably a bad call on their part, but I don't want to put my behind in the wind if something goes wrong. So that is a crucial element that outside of this assassination tip, America needs to know. We have done such a job of disingenuous and disenfranchising law enforcement and making them feel like they're just should go to jail. They should be the ones being locked up. Now you're reaping what you sow. You've got hesitancy all the time for law enforcement to be able to perform their duties. And this is one prime example when it comes to be. But the other thing that you raised is there are so many grievous violations of protocols. This is not, I didn't comb my hair the right way. These are huge breaks in protocols. And even if there were just one, it would cause tremendous concern. For there to be so many, the ones I just recounted to you, all the ones when the red flags are over, to be so many, that's huge, Michael. I'm not sure how you can answer that question.
And I just want to be clear. I'm certainly not blaming the sniper who did take him out. No, I understand he had to await the directive to be allowed to do it. So I get that. My thing is, I'm just trying to understand how this kid goes up on top of a building that law enforcement is already supposedly in. And now, I guess within the last day, the Secret Service head, Kimberly Cheadle, is now saying that, well, the reason that we didn't put a person on that building is because it had a sloped roof. And they thought that that was a safety issue. It's like, well, wait a minute. No, your job is to protect the president. And you know this because you were involved with Secret Service. Part of their job is the potentiality that they will die on the job protecting the president. I mean, that's just a no-brainer, man. I do not understand this. The failures are so profound. And my biggest worry is that nothing ends up happening. Please tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong, unfortunately. Let me tell you the way I see this playing out. And first of all, let's go back real quickly to what Kimberly was saying about the roof is sloped, and that's why he didn't put anybody on there. The assailant was on there for at least 10 to 15 minutes before he got time to take a shot. You're going to tell me the roof is that dangerous? How did he stay on it for that long if it was that dangerous? That is that's so far fetched.
It's preposterous.
It's preposterous. Now let's talk about what the consequences will be. Here's what the consequences should be. The consequences should be that Kimberly should be resigning. She ought to have enough integrity to do it herself.
Agreed.
She should resign him immediately. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas, should be resigning immediately.
Agreed.
And there should be a full congressional investigation as to what the White House knew when they know. You say, well, shouldn't Joe resign immediately? Again, like I said, I don't think he knows where he's at. So, I mean, I think we have to find out the facts. Who's the one at the White House that would have had knowledge of this particular incident, what was going on?
So when we look into this Kimberly Cheadle woman, she supposedly had 27 some odd years in the business, and she had recently come back from a position at Pepsi. But apparently she was a favorite, and I'm trying to find this gentleman's name that works for Jill.
She was on the Biden Secret Service detail when he was vice president.
And there's a guy named Bernal who apparently is kind of the Rasputin character of the administration. And Jill apparently loves this guy. And he is a big DEI guy. And he was one of the strong proponents, apparently, of Kimberly.
Yeah, and here's when you look at all of his political appointees. That's why it's not. Joe didn't do it from the day he swore he took office. Somebody else is running the show all along. Is they don't look at who's qualified. They look at one or two things. Either who has the political leaning to do their objective and is also willing to do what they're told, take the rap, whatever it takes, to execute the order given to keep them in power. And that's what really makes it so scary is you have an administration that has violated its own constitution and violated the law repeatedly in order to be able to position themselves to maintain power in the upcoming election. That's scary, Michael.
Michael, another thing that has bothered me from the time that Trump took office through current day. Okay, you don't like Trump? All right. Well, there's a lot of people that I don't like, but I have never called for harm against them. And I mean, I have never seen the decorum sag as badly as it did immediately, like celebrities, people that I know. I live in Los Angeles. They were openly calling in social media for, I don't even want to say it on my show because I find it irresponsible, but people were calling for harm against Donald Trump pretty much from the get-go. And I have never seen that with any administration prior to this. If people said stuff like that, it was in hushed terms in private, but people were doing this in the open. So the fact that they have immediately came and said, we've got to tone down the rhetoric. I'm sorry, that rings very hollow for me. And look, Trump says things that I don't like sometimes.
Right.
I mean, I wish that he would say things differently sometimes, but that just is what it is. But calling for harm against a president or a nominee, I can't accept that. And I hate that it has happened. And when we're talking about RFK Jr., earlier this year, it was only yesterday that they finally decided that Mayorkas said we're going to give him a Secret Service detail. I mean, this is a man whose own family suffered 2 assassinations, and you're not going to give him Secret Service detail. I mean, this is just off the charts irresponsible to me. I'm glad that they have decided to do so, but it's too late. Day late, dollar short.
There's no question right there. And you'd have to finish the question. You said, what do we see happening? So we mentioned that the director, the Kim should resign,
Yes.
Marcus should resign, and the White House should come clean. Okay. They're not going to do any of that on their own. Kim has already come out and said she's done. Failure, yes, but it doesn't mean she's going anywhere. So they're going to find somebody to throw under the bus.
Yeah.
And they're thinking that by throwing somebody in the bus, it's over. I can tell you that President Trump doesn't view it that way. And people are criticizing, saying, well, this administration, if he gets elected, it's going to be nothing but revenge and, payback. I will tell you this, and having personally discussed this matter with the president, revenge is not in his vocabulary. But one thing that is in his vocabulary that should be in every president's vocabulary is there will be accountability for people who do their actions. I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, you decide to take an action, violates the law, you will be held accountable for it. So what will happen with the new administration coming in, there will be a thorough investigation to figure out what laws, if any, were broken, what happened, and then the American people will know on their own exactly the facts. And I think that's all Americans want. I see that all the time on programs that I'm on. People just want to know the truth, Mike. That's all they want to know. Just tell me the truth.
And I think that people feel it. When they hear the truth, they feel it. They know it. Right. And they also know when they're being lied to. Right. And speaking of deception, and I don't know what all happened on Saturday, but my wife and I were listening to it from the minute it happened. And we were listening to people talk live about it on Twitter. And one of the things they said right off the bat was that the shooter was Antifa. And
they did.
They said that right off the bat. And I said to my wife at that point, how long is it going to take before they say that this was a right-wing extremist? So what do we wake up to the next morning? This 20-year-old kid is supposedly a registered Republican. His parents are now saying that he didn't really have any political leanings. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is my show. So I get to say what I think. And this is speculation, but I have to wonder because we've seen so many, unfortunately, political assassinations in the past. And typically there is somebody who's the patsy who takes the fall for this. And I'm not saying that he didn't do it. I just don't know that he has the capability to do it. And the fact that they immediately said somebody from Antifa, there are people that are saying that they believe that there was another shooter on the water tower, which was adjacent. So look, I don't know what happened, but I have the sneaking suspicion that Brooks was not the only person there with bad intent.
Well, I can tell you this. Let me put it this way: that it's be consistent with everything I've done in the last all my years and what we've done on these shows in the last 24 to 48 hours. There are enough gaps that nobody could have gotten that close to the president, been exposing a firearm that obviously. There had been that much time. Usually, an assassin is doing it within under a minute, 60 seconds. He gets in, breaks down, drops, fires, and breaks out and gets out. You had almost 30 minutes here. There's no way, Michael, any person, including me, could have pulled that off without having inside access and inside information as to how to make it happen.
That's what I think.
It's obvious because, quite frankly, here's why I give you even further pushback, Mike. That was the only barn that we deemed to be of critical importance that a team was not placed on. Now, how did he know that when he went up and got on the rooftop, there wasn't somebody already there? And, he would have been immediately apprehended. No. These are too many things, too much going on, Michael. For too many coincidences, it's not coincidental. He had to have assistance. Was it another shooter? Was it just intel and access provided? That remains to be seen in a thorough investigation. But did he do it by himself? That's impossible.
Another interesting thing, that unfortunate aspect of this, is in the immediate aftermath of this, a lot of people were saying, oh, this was a hoax or it was staged. And while I don't like that, I understand the distrust and the skepticism that is now endemic, because we've been through these types of things so many times, and especially it seems to only be on the increase. But what that ultimately does is create further distrust and skepticism and pessimism that justice is going to occur. This is a tragedy in so many different ways. It's also a psychological tragedy for the American people.
There's no question. And to kind of further elaborate on what you're saying, Michael, look, this was a hoax. There's no way.
No.
Life, precious life was lost.
Yes.
2 are in critical condition. There was an injury. You don't go to that extent for a hoax.
No.
Now, did they know about it ahead of time? Was assistance given something? All those are very valid questions, and we need to pursue them all the way to the very end. And as I said when I first got on your show, too many of these occurred in one sitting, in one situation, for you not to think that there are some additional things happening behind the scenes that have yet to be made public. But it was definitely not a hoax. And my concern now is, quite frankly, because this demonstrates how desperate they are to hold on to power. I want to clear the air. They're not very happy with Biden either. You remember, Biden's not making calls. We all know that. They're not very happy with him either, because he's not towing the line, doing what he wants, what they want him to do. Whether it's because his mind's just not there anymore. When you get old, sometimes you get ornery, and you're not going to obey what people tell you anymore. They're not really that crazy about him either. They would love to create a divisiveness that you could blame Trump being killed, the left, a retaliation, Biden being killed on the right by MAGA, and we go into full civil war. What does that do? That puts us in a state of national crisis, creates a opportunity for martial law, and suspend the election indefinitely. So don't give them what they want, but we need to make sure that this is not the last time. I don't think it will be the last time that they're going to make an attempt. They failed the first time, but also don't be surprised if you don't see some more pressure on Biden as well.
Michael, let me ask you this. I was listening to an interview with Eric Prinz, and he was criticizing the handling of this. And I've talked to private military contractors on this show before. As a matter of fact, just a couple of weeks ago, a person who was former Blackwater. If I'm President Trump, a man of means and resources, would I be allowed to supplement my Secret Service detail with private military contractors or security that I'm paying for as well?
There's no question you would be. And my discussion has been to advise the president that at this stage, since you got to look at 2 factors here. The investigation is being headed by the FBI. This is the same people that did Mar-a-Lago, that did the Russian dossier.
Right.
I mean, need I go on and on? So there's question about credibility. Sorry, Secret Service, but there's question about credibility. It's just the way it is. So there's no question he needs his own private detail to be there to run what I call primary first. Secret Service would go nuts over that, but we're not worried about who's going nuts. We're worried about protecting the life of the president of the United States, because he will be the president in the next couple of months.
So you don't think that he would be prohibited from that by Secret Service or?
They would argue, and they will push, and they will yell, but at the end of the day, it's his life, and he has the ability to make those choices. They will threaten, if you want to do that, we're not going to provide ours. They can't do that either. By law, they're required to, so they just can't walk away. And they would have to work out arrangements as to, code names, who's where, who's what, and how to deal with the liability. What they're going to want to know is, okay, if you're Michael now going to be next to him and not me, and he gets shot, I want to make sure I don't assume the liability because he hired you. And I mean, I'm a government employee. So all those kind of details would have to be worked out, but there's nothing that prohibits them from doing so.
Well, that's good to hear, and I hope that he does that. Let's turn a little bit to what you actually do with Invest USA. Now, one thing that surprised me is the fact that you have to do this, because I'm pro law enforcement, and I understand. I'm in Los Angeles, and I've interviewed law enforcement many times. And listen, I was a young rock and roller and stirred up a little trouble in my days, and so I wasn't always of the mind that I am now. But I mean, we're in a completely different situation, and I was surprised that a person like yourself is having to do this, because I thought that there would be sufficient funding for law enforcement to have things as objectively obvious to be necessary as these bulletproof vests, but I guess the funding is not there. So you're having to do this. Explain this a little bit for me.
Well, there's a couple factors here. First of all, and I've served in public office for over 30 years. So when you're talking about on the local levels, the taxation and providing the needs of law enforcement, you would think it'd be a no-brainer. That's what the Constitution, one of the few things the Constitution actually requires is to provide for the common defense. But when you have a lot of people who are not statesmen, who are politicians in these things, they're trying to do their best to appeal to get to as many people to vote for them to stay in office as possible. So if I have $100 and I was giving 50 of it to law enforcement, now I got to start scaling back so I can do something for a little parade here, a little barbecue over here, a little help this, the cats and the dogs here. And so quickly they begin to run into the situation. There's only so much money to go around. So in the past, they haven't touched law enforcement. You just talk about decades ago, because everybody knew how vital our first responders are. Not just law enforcement, firefighters, EMS. Everybody knew and respected that. When they began to figure out we need to get a narrative to put those in a negative light, what's their ultimate objective? Well, Michael, their ultimate objective is this: they want to be able to take away your freedoms and your liberties. They can't do that if you're an armed populace, and they got to figure out how to get your firearms away from you. The only people that could do it is somebody that's got a gun and a badge. They realize that local and state law enforcement are not going to do something that's unconstitutional typically. And why not? Because we know you. We go to the grocery store with you, Michael. We see you every day. So they need a federal force. So they deliberately created Black Lives Matter. They deliberately created a narrative that cops are racist, they're bullies, they're bigots, et cetera, et cetera. And then once that mainstream media picked up on that and started moving with that agenda, that narrative, the next question just begs for itself. Well, if you're that bad, why are we paying them? So let's move from there to defund the police. Once they knew that we defunded the police, officers were not going to stick around to be criticized for not getting the equipment that they need, not being paid effectively. They knew that when that happens, violent crime would spike, property crimes would begin to spike, which is where we're at today. They knew then that once it got bad enough, if you became fearful, Michael, about going out on the street, going to the mall, doing things because you're scared for your personal safety, that you'd be willing to give up freedoms. And the first thing the government has already put in place, that's why they asked for 87,000 armed IRS agents a couple years back, et cetera, is they would say, never fear, the federal government is here. We'll take over. The final thing on that is they have already said what their plan is. These agencies have said the problem with violence is guns, not the person that pulls the trigger. It's just guns. And so they will come in and say, we're going to fix your violence. We're going to confiscate the weapons. Everything will be great again. And that's where they're headed. And that's why they have done so effectively of making people think low-level law enforcement, causing many to quit and leave, not wanting to provide equipment. And then, of course, now they box themselves in a position. They made so many commitments to so many other constituency groups. There's nothing more they can do for law enforcement. If they had backbone or something, they could say, look, we're cutting out all this other crap. Our first and biggest issue has got to be to protect the people. And we're going to make sure they're funded properly. Nobody's got any backbone anymore, Michael. They're not going to do that. So now you just, and then what happens is you figure if I can put in 2 officers on the street or 1 officer fully equipped and fully protected, what looks better? I'll put 2 officers on the street and just pray that nobody happens to get hurt in my area, in my department. That's what's been happening for years, and it's backfiring now because what happens with the officers is we know the government doesn't care about us. We know they're using us. So you see everybody leaving. And one other side note to put in here, Michael, on this is as we leave, Los Angeles is being one. Your population law enforcement is down by almost 50%.
Yeah.
They fully expect you to steal the other 50% to provide 100% of the services. So they're beginning to burn the remaining officers, just burning them out, making them no more vacation, have to work extra shifts, overtime. That's not going to last for so long, Michael. They're going to say, you know what, my health, my family's worth more than this. I'm out of here. And once they're out of here, there's nobody left to put on a badge because you remember, they've done a fantastic job of characterizing law enforcement as a very poor choice, not worthy of respect, not worthy of honor. So right now, the biggest challenge across the country when I'm talking to agencies is I can't get anybody to put a badge on anymore. I have 100 openings. I have 3,000 applicants. I have 100 openings now. I got 20 applicants, and probably 19 of them aren't worth the powder to blow up. So that's what we have brought about with this liberal leftist ideology And it's time we put a stop to it. And it's time we reverse these positions and make law enforcement and first responders honored and worthy of the respect they deserve. Who else is going to stick their neck out on the line to actually die for you if need be, and they don't even know you? Probably you're one of the ones that don't like it, doesn't like them, but they're willing to do it anyway. They don't care. They do what's best for their community and their country. It takes a special kind of person to do that, Mike. It's about time we go ahead and give them the honor and the worthiness they deserve.
You said before we started recording that that a lot of the officers just had Kevlar vests, which I did not know is only effective against small arms. And the vests that you're providing are different types of vests. So expound on that a little bit.
Sure, we've had Kevlar vests for generations, for years. That's the concealable vest, the one you see underneath their shirt. It's 27 to 32 layers of Kevlar fabric. It's nothing but tightly woven fabric. It will stop any sidearm, 9mm, 45, 40 caliber. It will not stop a rifle. Rifle will go right through it. And so you remember now with all the new drug cartels coming across the border, the terrorists, human sex traffickers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they've upped the ante over the last few years. Now they're deliberately, because we brought in all these gangs like MS-13,
Right.
Tierra del Fuego, et cetera, et cetera. Their whole purpose when you're in a gang is that's the initiation is to go find a cop and kill him. So they're targeting them, and they're smart enough to know now that if I'm going to kill him, I got to have a long range rifle to do so. So they're bringing AK-47s, assault rifles. They're going after them, and they're killing them left and right. So we had to stop technology, stop what we were doing, change and recreate the technology. These vests now have titanium plates in them, best technology in the world. Stop any round out there, rifle or pistol. But unfortunately, Michael, because it's relatively new technology, and you remember we're not paying them very much anyway, we're not providing the
Right.
necessary equipment to have. 90% of cops don't have these new vests. We're putting them in harm's way with no ability for them to come home. What a shame.
Michael, how do people contribute to your cause to get these vests to law enforcement?
If they go to our website, that's www.investUSA, investusa, one word, .org. It's a charity.org. All this, they can donate on site. Everything is listed. A couple quick things I would tell your listeners. First and foremost, you can do for us today, tell a cop thank you. We have the lowest morale in history. Just say thank you for your willingness to serve. Those simple little words, smile and walk away. If you can buy him a cup of coffee or pay for his meal, great. If you can't, that's fine too. Just tell him thank you. Second thing is understand now that if you think a cop's going to be able to protect you and your family, you're sadly mistaken. We are so beat down and the line is so thin that the best we can do is find out who assaulted you and try to bring them to justice. We're not going to be able to prevent it. So if you want to do something to keep your family safe, you better own a firearm. You better know how to use it. You better be prepared to use it when the time comes, because that time is now coming. Third thing I'm telling people is this, including in California, because I know this because go out there quite a few times. There are reserve programs. There are posses for sheriffs, reserve programs for police departments, a state militia, state guard, for volunteers. Volunteer a little bit of your time every month to go on ride-alongs, to learn about the law enforcement, to become credentialed. You can actually do that through there and actually have credentials and a badge, because you're going to be needed to help support the line as this continues to escalate and continues to grow. And then the fourth thing I would tell people is this: look, the days of sitting at home and just saying, I'll let somebody else worry about my community, somebody else worry about educating my children, et cetera, are gone. If you want to live in a free country, in a free society, freedom is never free. It always comes with a cost. Dedicate some time and effort to being a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate you.
Michael, thank you. And you're right, man. Freedom ain't free. And I think, unfortunately, freedom is actually really underrated these days. Liberty and freedom are completely underrated because they have been told time and time again to people that these aren't really the important things. It's all about the collective and these other particular principles that supposedly are underlying what we have here in the United States. So, ladies and gentlemen, freedom ain't free. Michael, thank you so much for what you do, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you. God bless you. God bless America. We're looking forward to some big changes really soon, and we'll look forward to a victory celebration together, Mike. I'll have you with me. God bless you. You take care.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy this show, if you enjoy the information that we're providing here, I would love it if you could hit the like button, give us a subscription, maybe write a few kind words on your platform of choice that you like what we're doing here. And I'm always open to additional subjects to cover and whatever people want to hear. I'd love to hear from you. I appreciate anyone who's listening or watching the show. Ladies and gentlemen, until next time, keep your heart and your mind open. Peace.